are tonight talking about behavior contracts, and we're going to situate these as a tier 2 intervention within Ci3T, Comprehensive Integrated Three-Tiered Models of Prevention. These also absolutely can be done outside of a tiered system. And one of the things I'm going to encourage you to listen for tonight is, where is this situated? If you have a tiered system of support in place in your context, you use it. This is a validated approach. We are going to talk tonight about ways to accurately measure how this is going. We're going to talk about treatment integrity, which gives you a way to make sure it is happening as you intended it to be happening. We're also going to talk about social validity, so that as you're building this intervention, you're getting input from those involved, the teacher, the kid, the family member. And we're actually doing our favorite thing, which is looking at data to inform our instructional decisions. If you haven't been there yet, feel free to jump on to ci3t.org/enhance. Everything that we are showing you tonight is here. It is free. Is it accessible? When you log in, if this is your first time on that website, and only do this one time, please, you do register as a first-time user, and there's a consent form that's letting you know we keep track of your clicks. So we're looking to see which ones do you go in, how often do you go there, what do you use? And I'd like to give a shout out to the Institute of Education Sciences. They have funded the building of these beautiful resources, and they've been informed with input from over 720 teachers in the very first year of a 5-year project. And each year we've had thousands of teachers weighing in to give us input through the different districts, the 35 schools that we get to partner with. So this is going to be situated as a tier 2 intervention. And if you have found this page on the website, it'll look something like this to the right when you log in. And if you scroll down, you'll see pictures of all those modules. So if, again, you're here for the first time, you only fill this out once, and thereafter you can jump into the modules. Just so that you know where this is situated, there's a bank of resources. We just got to meet with some teachers this morning and some leaders, and they're looking at the onboarding model. There's resources for screening and tier 1 and low intensity supports and tier 2 of this one. And then also more intensive interventions like functional assessment based intervention, as well as information to build your base. So tonight, what we were talking about is this one tier 2 intervention, behavior contracts. And if you get into these for the first time and you think, I'm not totally sure how to use this, there is a little infographic inside each one of these that explains to you how to navigate these resources. So we're here today to be your sage on the stage, not so much, but more of a guide on the side, so that you can jump in, you can look at these, you're going to have these ebooks, and you're going to find these interactive resources. And this might be one specific tool in your toolkit. And this whole series is designed to be like speed dating for professional learning. There's no long-term commitment. You can drop in, you can come to more in one, but our goal in these sessions is to bring research-based strategies that are both practical, meaning socially valid, that people believe in the goals, they find the procedures to be acceptable, and they think it's going to work. And knowing that if they are acceptable, they're going to be more likely to be put in place as designed with treatment integrity, and then looking at your return for students. So tonight, our goals are, number 1 is to describe how secondary tier 2 interventions are situated within this tiered system. And then we are going to walk you through this step-by-step process for implementing contracts, and be on the lookout for what does it look like in a tiered system and what does it look like outside of it. And then we are going to close with explaining the importance about making sure that you're not just doing an intervention, but you're gaining people's input and you're monitoring implementation in relation to students' data as well. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to my wonderful friend and colleague, Dr. Royer.
Thank you, Kathleen.
You are welcome.
So before we get started with behavior contracts, with which Grant will get us launched into, I'm going to do a brief overview of secondary interventions or tier 2 interventions, Ci3T model of prevention. And like Kathleen said, this is all situated. We're going to present everything in the frame of the Ci3T model. So Ci3T, as many of you know and have heard and seen, it's an expanded form of a multi-tiered system of support to include that social domain. And like all the triangles that you see, we have these tiers of increasing intensity and personalization as we go up. And everything that happens at a Ci3T school can be found in their Ci3T implementation manual, starting with Tier 1. All of the roles and responsibilities are laid out for all of the people at the school, including students. So we've got roles and responsibilities for faculty and staff, for administrators, for students, even families and community members. So that's all laid out. And if you'd like to learn more about creating those positive, productive, safe learning environments at Tier 1 and all the things that happen at Tier 1, check out the green set of modules on that ci3t.org's Enhance page, all those enhancing Ci3T modules there for that base Tier 1, help you get set up, including very popular one, the 6-step instructional approach to responding to challenging behavior. We get a lot of inquiries about that one, but pre-referral process and others are there. So we want to put, of course, our greatest efforts at Tier 1. That's where we can get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of our efforts and resources and time. So we're monitoring social validity and treatment integrity of the whole system. We're conducting systematic universal screening for academics and behavior 3 times a year, getting those school-wide data for all students on not only academics and behavior, but attendance, nurse visits, suspensions, state test scores, and other things. So we have that data dashboard to be able to use with all those data sources side by side to connect students to supports. So when they need more than Tier 1, we can connect them to Tier 2 supports. And we know what those are because in our Ci3T implementation manual, we've got a secondary Tier 2 intervention grid listing them. So there's a module that's called the Tier 2 process that explains that whole thing. If you'd like to read more about how the whole system works, putting everything together. And we consider behavior contracts, our topic tonight, to be Tier 2, because even though they're individualized, once they're set up, they don't require that much time or effort or other resources to maintain as Tier 3 interventions might. So our behavior contracts, they're considered Tier 2 supports, even though they're, individualized one-on-one, compared to Tier 3 supports, which are also individualized, but require intensive supports in terms of ongoing time, effort, personnel, and other resources. If you'd like to learn more about Tier 3 supports, they're also on that Enhancing Ci3T Modules tab, including the functional assessment-based interventions and others. So we got Tier 3 for reading, Tier 3 for social skills, managing acting out behavior at Tier 3. Check out those red set of modules for more on Tier 3 interventions. So back to behavior contracts and Tier 2 interventions first. Actually, to do a little more on Tier 2 interventions, we want to clarify some key understandings. So there's this infographic in that Tier 2 process module, and it emphasizes how person-first language and other language matters. We don't refer to students who receive Tier 2 supports as Tier 2 kids. There are no yellow blobulous bodies running around school. We don't have Tier 2 kids and Tier 3 kids. We have students who need more than Tier 1 and students who receive Tier 2 supports because they're students first. So that language matters when we're talking about our students. There's no yellow kids over there, right? So be sure that you encourage that and gently maybe remind people when you hear other people using that type of language that they're students first. And their needs are fluid. They may need a Tier 2 support for reading and a Tier 3 support for behavior and be fine with everything else at Tier 1, like social skills. And that may be different next semester or next quarter as they receive an intervention. Maybe they're now Tier 2 for behavior and Tier 1 for math, but now something else has happened in their life and they need some Tier 3 supports for social skills. So those tiers are fluid. Our movement between the tiers are fluid, and I may have multiple needs across the tier. So that's why that language matters. And a reminder that we stress is that these interventions, Tier 2 supports and Tier 3 supports even, can occur in various locations, including and especially the classroom. A lot of teachers think that specialists have to come in and pull out students to get intervention supports like tier two, whereas they may come into the classroom and provide supports there. And the teacher can provide those supports, whether it's in small groups and rotations, or as a teacher, I can provide a tier two low intensity support all day long for an individual student or a small group of students, as well as for my whole class, but I'm intensifying it for those few students who might need more. Also, we want to remind that the tier two support isn't a person. So on the intervention grids, which we'll look at, we don't list counselor as the intervention. It's not the person, it's what they provide. And even counseling, we'd want to be more specific. Is it the anger management counseling that is the support? What type of counseling is it that there is? It a social skills small group counseling or intervention? What is it specifically? So we don't list people, because also they may change positions, they may transfer to another school or take on another role, but that source of the support is going to continue with various people. So we list the support, not the person. And where possible, this last bullet here on this infographic, we ideally would like to integrate supports. So on your intervention grids in your Ci3T implementation manual, you'll see all the different interventions at tier two, and they're not separated by academics, behavior, and social. They're all listed. And when possible, we want to even integrate those. So I might do a self-monitoring behavior intervention to support my time in my math group, or I may have a behavior contract while I'm doing my reading intervention. And those are integrated to make the supports even more efficient and effective for the students, because we know academics and behavior challenges so often go together. And when there's one, there's another. So integrating them can be much more efficient and effective. So check out what tier two interventions you have listed in your Ci3T implementation manual, or if you're not at a school implementing Ci3T right now, consider building tier two grids for your school. There are many examples online on that Enhancing Ci3T tab. All of the yellow and purple modules are going to have a grid that you can look at, and there's resources elsewhere you can check with your coach in our breakout rooms tonight if you'd like to get a blank template, which is found on our Building Your Ci3T module tab. But lots of examples there. You can copy and paste those examples into a manual or use the language as templates to update to match the context and setting at your school and your situation. Each row in your tier two intervention grid, each single row represents one support. And on that row, we're going to name what the support is, describe it in detail with the dosage and maybe where it takes place and what type of curriculum is used or what procedures and strategies take place during the time that this tier two intervention is occurring. So whatever that strategy, practice, or program it gets described there, not the name of the person providing it. And then the third column is our school-wide entry criteria. So these are data with cut scores, numeric numbers to know when are students eligible to receive this support. Because as a school, as a data team or the Ci3T leadership team, I can get the data for my whole school from my academic and behavior screening time points, and maybe have that side by side some other things in a data dashboard, which I'll show an example of. And I can filter for these cut scores to say, we've got the structure set up. For this example, there's a self-monitoring intervention grid on your screen. I'm going to filter for these entry criteria and see all the students who qualify for it and make sure they either have some other support already in place or get them connected to this support. Because we've got the resources, it's set up as at our school, and we want to make sure that all the students who need it and qualify for it are receiving it. And then the next column there is our data to progress monitor. Because once students start receiving their tier two support, we want to make sure it's working. So whether it's a weekly check-in or a daily, if I'm checking a behavior contract daily, I'm looking at the data, whatever it might be, to make sure it's working. And we include in this column social validity data and treatment integrity data because we want to know that it's acceptable for all the people involved, the adults who are going to be monitoring or using it, implementing it, as well as the students who are receiving it or doing it themselves if it's self-monitoring or doing their part in the behavior contract. Because if they're embarrassed by it or mortified by having to carry around this clipboard with a checklist on it, then they're not going to do the intervention and they're not going to be receptive to what the teachers are trying to do. So we would make modifications and hopefully small ones. Maybe we make it electronic or it gets pasted into their planner that all students carry it around so it's not as obvious that they have this support. But making it socially acceptable by checking social validity data, we can make adjustments, then it's more likely to happen with integrity. And that's the other thing we monitor. Is it happening as designed? Is it in place as we created it? So is this description what's actually happening? So periodically, it could be every day to start, it could be once a week, it might depend on the intervention. I'm checking the treatment integrity checklist, that all the elements that make this intervention, making sure that they're in place, that they're happening as designed. And if anything's not, that's my opportunity to revisit or receive some extra training or whatever it might take to get those items in that integrity checklist up and back to high levels. And the last column, sometimes forgotten in different areas around school, is the exit criteria for an intervention. I don't want to get locked in or stuck in to something. So there's certain criteria, cut scores, and it usually mirrors the entry criteria. So if I needed to be at moderate risk or have 2 or more discipline referrals, my exit criteria might be low risk or 0 discipline referrals for a grading period. That lets people know I've been successful receiving this intervention and I no longer need to receive it, or it's time to start fading it and making sure that I can sustain all my good behavior and academic work without the intervention in place. So we might start fading it. So those are listed there and important to keep track of. So check out the, again, yellow and purple chunks of modules on that Enhancing Ci3T Modules tab. Each one will have a grid that you can use, copy paste into your intervention grid or model. And we'd like to hear from you now. So thinking about what's in place at your school, what tier 2 interventions do you offer, or have you seen or done with your students? So just for a minute, if you would, drop in the chat what tier 2 interventions are offered at your school. Maybe you've heard of one or seen one or want to try one. That would work too. Okay, point sheets, behavior charts, check in, check out. Yep, that's an evidence-based one, very popular. And small support groups, good. We do want to get specific with what support's being offered in those small support groups for sure. Lots of behavior point sheets, which work as contracts. Check in, check out. Self-monitoring, great. Yep, very good one there. Reflections, good. Social emotional, so social skills focused. Good. I've seen like lunch bunches for social skills development and things like that. That's great. And behavior contracts, great. And you're here to learn more, learn that there's different types of behavior contracts that we're going to get into. Great. All right, keep those coming. And I wanted to illustrate and show you, here's an example of a data dashboard where I've got all my different sources of data side by side. And from here, I can look and see which students need more based on multiple sources of data, not just one. I wouldn't want to make a high stakes decision on only one source of data. The first thing I'm going to look at is attendance. A student needs to be in school to receive any intervention that I would want to connect them to. And so if attendance is low, if they have high numbers of absences or even tardies, I might need to investigate that first with interviews with the student, with the family, figure out what's going on and what can we do to support getting to school on time every day, and address that issue first before connecting to any other supports. Maybe it's an anxiety issue. Maybe there's something going on with a particular student or another teacher, and we need to work that out first. But figuring that out could be key first for attendance. Then I'm going to look at my behavior screening data side by side my academic screening data, which may be broken down into different areas, or I can look at a composite score for something. And from there, I can filter and look at my data and decide what it is that I'm going to use. I might choose a particular one. So here's my fall reading composite risk level. And then my math is on the right there. I might look at all of those. So I'm looking at my intervention manual first to see what supports are available in my tier 2 grids. I'm going to locate and use school-wide data, hopefully in a data dashboard, or I can manually put those together for my class. And with our data support person at our school or district, they can build those sometimes. And I've worked with schools and we've done it manually for the whole school just by pulling different reports and merging them together with some formulas in Excel. There's different ways to do it, but we can do it. And then the third item you see here is we need a place to document the decisions that we're making, the interventions that we're starting, how they're going, what each student's receiving. And you'll see tools for that, different types of databases for documenting those decisions and planning for next steps, keeping track of the data and who's in what intervention. In that tier 2 process module, you'll find more information and those resources. And those are available in Microsoft Excel that you can download or Google Sheets that you can make a copy and add to your drive. So let's review for an example. If I wanted to take this self-monitoring intervention, I would look at these entry criteria and then go to my data dashboard for my whole school and determine who can I connect to this support. So looking at my entry criteria, I know I'm going to look at my externalizing behavior screening data, and I'm going to look at an academic. So in this case, my Ames Web reading academic screening data. And I know I need those to be at moderate risk. So I'm going to filter for those. So first for the externalizing behavior, I'm going to filter for yellow, which is the moderate risk. That in this small sample brings me down to 5. Then I can filter for reading, and yellow would be like 1 grade level below, for example, in my Ames Web reading, just as an example. And there I've got 2 students who would qualify for this self-monitoring intervention based on those entry criteria in their intervention. So watching it again, I filter for moderate risk on the behavior screener, externalizing subscore first, and then the academic screener for reading at elevated risk. And then I've got my 2 students. So that was maybe just for my class, but imagine if you did that with school-wide data as a leadership team. You could see for the whole school who needs more. And again, I might focus and look at that attendance column because these 2 students, I might want to work with Julia here to figure out what's going on with attendance before I connect her to that self-monitoring example. And keep in mind, there are other tier 2 options that may have very similar entry score criteria. So I might consider one versus the other. Maybe with my student success team, we're looking at these multiple options and talking with the teacher of who's on that team, of course, and determining which one is best for this student given the data and what we know is happening in the classroom. So there are other options too. Or maybe I filtered and found these 2 students, but one of them's already receiving a self-monitoring intervention. I may work with the teacher, or I am the teacher, and I'm going to increase my rate of behavior-specific praise for all the pro-social and good behaviors, on-task behaviors that I want to see happen more often. So there are other options out there that we might consider. So we're just going to have a short 5 minutes to discuss with a few other people about data you've used to connect students or how you determine which students might need more and which tier 2 intervention you use most often.
So, hi everyone. My name is Grant Allen. I'm an assistant professor of special education at the University of Wisconsin Stout, and it's nice and snowy here, and I hope the weather is fine wherever you are. So, I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about just an overview of behavior contracts, and then later on, we'll get into the actual process, the step-by-step of implementing this tier 2 intervention. So, imagine you've got yourself a kiddo with tier 2 needs, and you're looking at your entry criteria and you're noticing based on your school-wide data that, oh, that's nice. Kiddos coming in at some moderate risk for some externalizing challenges. And I'm also noticing that we've got some challenges in academics, that we've got maybe intensive or strategic level of that. So based on my entrance criteria, looking at my tier 2 grid, this kiddo could could qualify to have a behavior contract as an intervention. And so we'll be talking about kind of what that looks like. But first, I just want to take a moment and open up the chat, if you would. In terms of, for folks that are working within Ci3T, what are some of those entry criteria that you have in your manual? So if you've got your manual open, the tier 2 grids are usually at the bottom towards the end of your manual. And if you would drop something in the chat about what your entry criteria look like, and if you're not at a school implementing Ci3T, what are some data sources that you might consider as you kind of review student data? Like what might tell you that a student might qualify for a behavior contract? Okay, looking at some MTSS data. So looking at our kind of our data management systems, looking at Swiss, very cool. Okay, so sometimes also there's a referral system in place. Very nice. Looking at the SRSSIE data, yeah, some behavior screening data. Those are all very nice. I see you dropping in the criteria there. Very cool. So whatever it is you're working at within your system, we want to again emphasize the importance of sort of the database decision making piece of it, right? That whatever we're working on with kids, we want to make sure we're using an effective, efficient use of our time because we only have them for 175 days or whatever. And I tell my undergrads that, and it seems like it's a lot, but it ain't. So it's important that we're efficient with that time. And so suppose that the data suggests that maybe a behavior contract might be useful. Let's take a look at that. What exactly do we mean by that? So a behavior contract is a mutually agreed upon document between at least 2 individuals in which one or more people agree to demonstrate a certain behavior or behaviors. And that's basically what it is. It's a document that's a written agreement for what's going to happen in the future about some behaviors. The behavior contract should have three components in order for it to be, an effectively, correctly implemented intervention. You're going to want to have yourself a description of the behavior, a description of what the reward is going to be for performing the behavior. And you're going to want the recording sheet, the sheet that has the information about what is included in the contract itself, and a place to actually record that information to collect the data. So let's break this down one at a time. The first piece of it is that behavior. So you may have picked up on, but the work that we do within Ci3T is informed by our framework of applied behavior analysis. And we're using the tools of behaviorism to increase the happiness and well-being of the folks in our care. And so part of that is having really solid, very clear definitions about what exactly it is that we're looking at with a behavior and what are we trying to work towards. So to clearly define a behavior, you're going to want sort of four component pieces of it. You're going to want to describe the who is going to be doing the behavior, what specific behavior will be performed, when the behavior is going to be performed, and like how well, what's the level of performance that you're looking for. So the presentation includes a nice little example here of exemplifying all the pieces of this. So Charlie is the person in this example who's going to be doing the behavior. They're going to turn in accurate and complete math assignments. Okay. That's the what. By the end of independent seat work time. Okay, so that's the when. It's going to be like in class during math time when students are working on their independent math work. And how well. So it's going to be 100% of all assignments completed and 80% accuracy per assignment over the course of 1 week. And that's really important because you want to be clear about what we mean by, accurate and complete. What exactly does that mean? It's a nice, clear definition that two people could look at this definition and agree whether it's happening or not. It's a good operational type of definition. So you want the component of behavior clearly lined out first. That's component one. Component two is the reward. So part of the behavior contract is figuring out, okay, as do people do the behavior, what's going to be the sort of reward, the reinforcement for doing so? And the reward also is comprised of four different pieces. First, we're going to want to talk about who's going to be in charge of giving the reward. That's really important because you don't want to have a situation where a kid was like, oh, you won the reward. Oh, great. Okay, who's doing that? Who's giving it to you? Like, who's in charge of that? You want to clearly describe that. You want to describe what the reward's going to be, when it's going to be given out, and how much. Like, what's the quality of the reward? So, in the example listed here, which is taken from our fine behavior contracts module, you've got the who as Mrs. Baldwin and Mr. Fanning. Those are the adults who are going to be in charge of delivering the reward, contingent upon the behavior being met. And then what is going to be best bucks. Now you'll notice that this reward is situated within the tiered system of Ci3T. So we're using the reward contingency that's accessible for all kids, and we're leveraging that system to help support future behavior. And kind of the idea is that you want to kind of generalize that. And when kids, when they do go off of a behavior contract, you want them to be sort of used to earning that same system, right? So you can also have rewards like for this one, it's the short break during math. Maybe at home, they're offering like a video chat with a friend or going out to dinner. And then of course, we're describing when, your best bucks, your school currency, your school-wide tickets can be given out daily, and other things can be given out at different times. Like going out to dinner once a week, it's probably important to outline that because, it's like, it's a once a week kind of a thing. And of course, like how much you're describing sort of the quality or in quantity of what it is that the reward is going to be. So if you're giving out a reward of, say, video chat time with a friend or spending time with a friend or like video game time, you want to be clear about what it is that the student may be working towards. Because if you're saying, all right, you get a 1-minute phone call with your friend, or you make it count, that might not be quite a reward a student might want to work for. So just being clear about what that is. So that's component two. The third component is the recording sheet. So then this is sort of the document the artifact that is produced through the behavior contract meeting. Everyone comes together and we create this. This is our written agreement for who's going to do what. And it's a great place to sort of record the data to track the progress towards the target behavior that we're working on. And Carrie, I say to myself in my own personal life that clarity is kindness. So I would echo that clarity removes opportunities for disappointment. It's so if everyone's on the same page, we understand together what's happening as we move forward. So with those three pieces in place, look at that. You got yourself a behavior contract. Now, these behavior contracts are effective for a number of different ways. And again, thinking about this from sort of an applied behavior analysis framework, from a behavioral framework, so a number of phenomena that we can kind of point to that help to explain why these behavior contracts have been demonstrated to be effective for kids and for anyone, really. One is rule governed behavior. So, within the environment, there are rules that are sort of in place, and people's behavior can be predicted based on the extent to which those rules are known and understood. A rule in the environment, it describes the relation between a behavior and a given consequence. So, for example, if I'm, driving on the freeway in my, in my Bugatti, which is definitely real, I'm going 100 miles an hour. That's a little too fast. I'm not going to do that because I know that if I drive fast on the highway, I may receive a speeding ticket. I know that that's a rule that's in the environment, and so because I know that, my behavior is going to change based off that. So behavior contracts capitalize on this phenomenon by establishing a rule in the environment. Public commitment's also a big part of it too. You can say a goal to yourself, or you can try to aim for something kind of as a passing thought, but then is that really, did you really commit to that? Is that a thing that actually happened? When you publicly commit to changing a behavior or increasing a behavior, it's going to be more likely to happen. And we don't want to say oh, okay, hey, little Timmy's got this behavior contract, so everyone pay attention. We don't want not like that kind of public commitment, but more like as a team, you're the teacher, the student, maybe the parent, like we're going to publicly commit together to do a certain behavior. And of course, the phenomenon of positive and negative reinforcement. We know that people want to generally access things they want and avoid things that they don't want, and we can support that by adding things into the environment to increase their behavior. That's positive reinforcement. Or we can take away aversive things in the environment to increase their behavior. That's negative reinforcement. Now, fun fact, negative reinforcement is not punishment. Now, that's something that's can be quite confusing, but negative reinforcement is taking away something, an aversive in the environment, in order to increase their behavior. Think of like the quintessential homework pass. Some people like homework. A lot of kids, maybe not a big fan of homework, but you could give someone a homework pass that helps to take away that aversive experience as a way to sort of increase a behavior. So these are antecedent-based interventions. And the wide variety of behaviors that you can support with behavior contracts are, you can do appropriate social interactions, attendance, grades, work completion, and there's also sort of non-academic types of things like aggressive, disruptive behavior. You can use you can target a lot of different behaviors with a behavior contract. They're very flexible in that regard. So both, things that relate to academics and maybe not so much. So there are a few different types of behavior contracts that we can use in school settings. The first one being a one-party contract. Okay, so the point of this contract is to have one person be in charge of sort of changing a behavior. Okay, maybe they want to increase something, do something differently. So one person sort of agrees to themselves that they're going to change a behavior or do something differently. Now, as part of a one-party contract, the one individual agrees to it, and they often have what's called a contingency manager that is sort of the gatekeeper for the reward component. So they check to make sure that whatever behavior change was agreed upon actually happens, and then boom, they can give out that reward. There's also two-party contracts, and there's a couple of these. So the first one here on the screen is the quid pro quo contract. And this involves two people agreeing to change their behaviors, one sort of contingent on the other. So this example here says that if Aiden Jones, they agree to be in the truck with the backpack by 7 a.m., to get ready to go to school. And Aiden's mom is going to agree that if they do that, then they're going to refrain from reminding Aiden to be on the truck. So the idea is that, okay, I agree to get ready to go if you agree to not bug me about it. Okay, so the two behaviors are related to one another. You can also have two people agreeing to sort of do separate, kind of parallel behaviors. Each person sort of agreeing to change a behavior on their own, not contingent on one or the other. This is called a parallel contract. And you can also have what's called a three-party contract, where multiple individuals are involved in it. And I kind of like this because it can involve like family members. So it might be one, maybe a child is agreeing to, increase being on time to class every day, maybe in middle school, and in exchange, the teacher will hand out more tickets and use a reward system, and maybe the parent will be involved in a reward contingency as well. This is nice because it connects school and the home to some behavior change. With that in mind, we're going to take some more time to do some talking here. We're going to go to a breakout room and we'll give you some time to talk about what your initial thoughts are to the behavior contract, feasible components, questions you have, and give you a chance to answer some questions about what might be more challenging. And you'll have coaches in the room to help you out.
Okay, thank you, Grant. He gave us a great overview of behavior contracts and the different types. And I'm going to spend just a few slides here to review the first step in the 9-step process for implementing behavior contracts. And keep in mind,
don't know.
later,
I
the
don't
next
know,
thing
but
we're going to be doing is in a breakout room, you're going to have some time to start filling out a sheet. So I'm going to model for you in a moment where to get this. And in the breakout room, you're going to get started. Now, you of course won't be able to finish because you do need to work with multiple people to build your behavior contract. It can't just be you doing it on your own. You want to do it with the student and figure out all the contingencies. And you want to do it with other adults who are going to be involved, whether it's the elementary special teachers that they go see, or if you're in middle school or high school, all the period teachers that they rotate through. So our hope is you're going to walk out of here with a partially drafted plan, but later collaboratively, you'll continue to work on it and refine it. So in order to get ready for that, we're going to periodically pause and fill out different parts. So let's go get this form and get started. So if we log in, and I'm going to show you in the web browser here, we're going to log into the behavior contracts module. So here I am on the Enhancing Ci3T Modules tab of ci3t.org. I'm going to scroll down to the yellow modules. Hope that didn't make anybody dizzy. And here's behavior contracts. They're shaking hands, making that agreement. I'm going to click on there, and if it's my first time, it'll ask me for some information. But because I've done that registration that Kathleen talked about in the beginning, and I've waited my 5 minutes, my email's already in the system. So I type it in and it's like, great, thanks for validating. Go ahead and continue. So now I'm in the module and I'm going to go to the overview tab. And below the intro video to every module that you'll find here is this table of resources, and it shows you a thumbnail picture of what those resources are. So I'm going to scroll down until I find the planning sheet. So you can see the different templates for each type of behavior contract that Grant was talking about, and intervention grid examples. And here we go. I want this handout, behavior contracts planning sheet. I could jump to the page of the module where it talks about it, but I'm going to just click the link and that's going to download it for me. And then I can open that. Invention. There we go. So this is what you're going to be looking for. That should look like this. And I'm going to walk you through step 1, and then we'll do time to get filled out in breakouts. And then Grant and Carrie is going to walk you through more steps. So real fast, just again, if I go to Ci3T on the Enhancing Modules tab, so it looks like this, you're in the right place. And I scroll down to the yellow, find the one where there's shaking hands, behavior contracts. I type in my email that I've pre-registered, go to the overview tab. So that's your big step. Once you get to the module, go to the overview tab, scroll down a bit, past the contracts, past the intervention grids, and you'll see the behavior contracts planning sheet. Click the link to download. So if you've got that, we're looking at what you see on the right here. And the first step is to identify the behavior. And when we do so, we want to operationally define it. And there's kind of two parts here. You know what behaviors pushing your buttons or is disrupting the class or whatever it is that has caused you to think about needing a behavior contract and going to those school-wide data and connecting students to this support. So there's a behavior that we're going to identify that we would call the target behavior, the one that we're hoping to replace with something better, something more pro-social, for getting along with everybody, that's on task, it's engaged, whatever it is, the good behavior. And we're going to want to operationally define both of those, or you can pick one to start with for tonight, but we usually try to think of the positive. We want to keep the positive good behavior in front of the students. And so even if some of the templates might say, what's the target behavior that you're trying to reduce, you might consider using the replacement behavior, what you want to see more of and increase, what you want the student to do, because we always want to be keeping it positive and telling students what to do versus what not to do. And in the module, you'll see this infographic that walks you through the 4 parts to operationally defining a behavior. I'll walk through those in just a moment. But you want to be thinking about, okay, there's many behaviors, or which behavior do I choose, or how do I know? Think about, for the student you have in mind, a certain time of day maybe where there's always challenging behavior that's predictable. That's the time to maybe put the behavior contract in place, because it doesn't have to be for the whole day. It could just be for math time. During math time, this is what you're going to do, and this is what I'm going to do, and here's what's going to happen when we both do our parts. So it could be a certain time of day or a certain type of activity. Whenever we do independent work, this is the contract. Or it could be a certain location when we're on the rug for circle time or calendar time, any activity on the rug, this is the contract. So think about where the most challenging behaviors are occurring predictably, and that's what we're going to work to define. And you might choose to do a replacement behavior for what you want to see happen during that time of day, during that context, during those activity. So 4 parts. We got label, definition, examples, and non-examples. You can see the examples for each of those parts in the circles. So label is just the name of the behavior, in this case, academic engagement or on-task behavior. And then a very concise, brief overview definition. Engaging in instructional tasks as requested, or doing the work as assigned, something short and simple. And then in examples, you can list as many as you want, specific to the student, not just generally for the world, but what does it look like for this student when they're engaged? Okay, they got their eyes on the teacher, they're raising their hand and waiting quietly to be called on. It's okay if they glance away for 3 seconds as long as they come back. So, we all get distracted, we look at something, we come back. That's still engaged. And then you do non-examples and anything that usually is opposite of the examples, but not something that a dead person can do, because a dead person could not do things. They could not raise their hand. So we want to say things like looking away for more than 3 seconds, doodling, having off-topic conversations. So those are the 4 parts to defining a behavior. And there's more examples that we're going to go through and share tonight. And I got another one coming up on the next slide. If you've done well with this operational definition in 4 parts, you'll have a clear, defined behavior that's objective, it's observable, it's unambiguous, it's clear. Anybody could come in and collect data exactly the same because of this operationally defined definition. Everybody's on the same page, so to speak. The full definition clearly articulates what does and what does not meet the definition. So we've got those examples and non-examples. There's no wiggle room for subjective judgment. We know it's either the behavior or it's not. And it's going to describe an action rather than a non-action. So again, it's got to pass that dead person test. It has to be, if it's something a dead person can do, then it's not a behavior. So however that's phrased, it's got to be something that we can see and requires action by our student. So here's an example. It's labeled participation. It's defined as responding to teacher or peer-initiated interactions. So my participation may be during class discussion lecture with the teacher, or I may have an activity with my neighbors or my table group or something like that. Examples: raising hand, verbally responding to teacher-led questions, volunteering information during academic tasks, verbally responding during choral responses, using nonverbal responses such as thumbs up and down or response cards. Great, I can picture all of those and know that that's going to be participation. Non-examples: if I shout out off-topic responses, if I look away silently when the teacher asks me a question, that kind of just give me the cold shoulder. Okay, that's not participating. And it's an action. I'm looking away silently. Or maybe I'm doodling during an academic task. Now that may change. Some students can doodle and be fully participatory. It's a way to actually keep their mind focused, that doodling. So you have to know your students when you come up with these examples and non-examples. And that's step one, that operational definition of behavior. So we're going to give you, Stacey's going to tell us maybe how many of these 10 minutes in our breakout room to pull up that planning sheet and just complete step one, discuss in your room and throw out some ideas and clarify the definition, examples, and non-examples.
Okay, so
Thanks, Grant.
step two is we're meeting with the stakeholders. Once we've got the first step completed, the next step is to bring people together. Okay, so it's all about scheduling a meeting with all the relevant parties that are going to be involved. So it could be like with a classroom teacher, with yourself, a student, family members, principals, whoever you want to be kind of involved in the process. You want to get everyone together. And you want to do this for a couple of reasons. You want to make sure that everyone understands sort of the purpose, why it is that we're creating this behavior contract and kind of what we all want to get out of it, kind of get everyone on the same page of what are the goals of this intervention. But we also want to provide an opportunity to build buy-in and really social validity by getting feedback from everyone. We want to have a situation where people are sharing their thoughts and sharing what they think is useful and what they would find beneficial, what they would find appropriate within this behavior contract. And, I think generally, whenever we do interventions for folks, we want to get their feedback because we want the school game to be something that they participate in rather than something that's sort of done to them. So not only that, but we also want to make sure that everyone does buy into the behavior contract. If there's more buy-in from folks, from families, from teachers, from the students, the more likely people are going to engage in that behavior contract with fidelity, and it's going to be more likely then that you're going to get the outcomes that you desire. So that's kind of why we're meeting with stakeholders at this time. So we get together, we're going to explain the intervention details. Here's what we have listed out. Here's maybe what I propose for the behavior contract. And then you're encouraging feedback and participation. So, you're reviewing maybe like the behavior of concern. You're asking folks, what are you seeing? You're asking the student, how do you feeling when you engage in this behavior? Tell us a little bit about kind of why you do X, Y, or Z thing. Kind of listening feedback from everyone involved in the process, and make sure that for adults who are going to be involved in doing the behavior contract, that you want them to recognize that if they're going to be involved in it, that they can actually follow through on those things. So, if you're working with like some specials teachers or other teachers that maybe might be itinerant, you want to make sure that they'll be available to hold up whatever their agreement is in the behavior contract. Working with families, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to support the behavior contract in the way that they've agreed to. You don't want to put too much pressure on folks, like you don't want to sort of overpromise on things. You want to make it a sort of a manageable level of contribution from folks, because you want to be able to implement the behavior contract as agreed upon and with fidelity. And having this sort of initial conversation is going to help to make that happen. So meeting with stakeholders, step two. As you're having the conversation, you'll want to make sure that you're identifying student strengths and areas of concern. This is step three. Highlighting student strengths is nice. Not only is it just sort of nice generally and kind of ethically important that we don't just come out the gate with talking about what kids are doing wrong and kind of getting down for that, but highlighting student strengths is really nice to think about ways to incorporate those strengths into the behavior contract in some way. If you got a student that is, social and bubbly and enjoys interactions with people, that could be something that we can work into the behavior contract. If they have friends that they want to spend time with, we can maybe incorporate that as part of the behavior contract. But it's focusing on the positive things of it. Then we're going to introduce what the target behavior is. So we want to explain kind of what behavior do we want to shape with this contract. If we have some challenges with, say, maybe daily attendance, then we want to say, okay, the thing that we want to shape is coming to school. As Kathleen likes to say, it is free, and you benefit most when you're there all day. It's a must be present to win type of an arrangement. So, but whatever the behavior is, you explain, why it's important, why we want to shape it, why we want to increase it, how it's going to help the student in the long term. And then, of course, we invite parents, invite their input on that, to share their perspectives. What are they seeing? What are some concerns they have? What do they want to get out of it in terms of an outcome? And just sort of sharing their perspectives, sharing successes, all that kind of stuff. So We're identifying strengths, we're identifying areas of concern, and we're explaining the importance of the behavior that we're going to be trying to shape. So, quick chat here. What questions do you folks have at this time about like meetings with parents and families?
Great question. I would say, especially like when you're working, like, so you're working in a PBIS system. So what this one we explained today, it was like Ci3T. So PBS is at the beginning and it has social and emotional well-being, academics. I would say that is a huge strength if you're doing that in the classroom. The whole goal of Ci3T and these tiered systems is to not have teachers wait. And so the reason why, like we do this tonight, while David walked through these steps while we're doing this incrementally, is we want to empower every educator to be able to look at their own data in their own classrooms and say, hey, these data suggest that Kathleen or Grant could potentially benefit from a little bit more than I'm doing for every other kid. It's not a tragedy, it's an expectation. Some kids are going to need more. So with this expertise, you can build this support. And by doing it with families, you're showing them it's like you're just committed to their kid. Like you want them to have a good experience in school and enjoy being there and maximize their learning and supporting their well-being. So you're going to put this together. And the nice thing about behavior contracts is that it can target anything. Like it can target work completion, engagement. It can target pro-social like behavior, like initiating more on the playground. It can for secondary students, it could like focus on doing more exercise before you come to school. Like the CrossFit gym I go to, there's a bunch of high school kids that come in the morning. It sets a really positive tone for their day. Very good question.
Yeah, and if folks have additional questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I'm just going to move us along just so that we can get some more time in that breakout room. So the step 4, and this is the final step that I'll talk about before we break into the next piece of it, are writing the behavioral objectives for the behavior that's going to be the target of the contract. What is it that we want the child to do, right? So who's going to perform the task? It'll be the student or other folks, depending on the type of contract that you've got. So who's going to perform the task? What is the behavior going to be? What are the conditions? So like for example, when is the student going to be performing the given task, and how well do we want to do this? You might consider looking at some of that baseline information. Like if you're doing like attendance, for example, you might say, okay, what's been their attendance rate over the past week or so, or the past couple of weeks? What does that look like? And you might include that as like a way to base what you want the criteria for success to be, the timeline for when the behavior is gonna occur, and of course a data collection method. We want to be able to track information so we know, is it working? Is it being effective? So here's an example of a behavioral objective that might be written for a kiddo. This one's about like raising their hand and waiting to be called on. You'll notice it has all the component parts. This is going to happen during circle time. 50% of the time is the criteria for success for this student, again, based on baseline data. And the time frame is by the end of the school week, and the teacher will be recording the information. So we can sum it up in a behavioral objective once we've got all the pieces together. And we've got sort of a long-term goal about what this looks like. So for this student, it'll be behavior contract for 7 to 8 weeks before we kind of revisit. So, okay. So at this time, we're going to invite folks to look at step 3 and 4 of that behavior contract. And Kathleen, you want to jump in?
Yes, I want to pop up one thing in the chat. So great overview, Grant. That was really helpful.
Thank you.
You asked a really good question about like what's the difference between behavior contract and a behavior intervention plan. So what we're talking about is like a tier 2, like moderate level of support. A behavior intervention plan is typically more detailed and usually based on the function, like the reason why a behavior challenge occurs. And we're going to do that together, not in the next section, but the one after that. And that would be like a tier 3 support. So you might think about this as a first line of defense, that you're going to build this as a lighter intervention. So when you're thinking about this, and I'm going to follow like Tammy into her group for a second, because like if people are having really explosive behaviors, if we can identify shifts for behaviors that occur before behavior becomes really severe, this is a good place to start. But if kids are consistently at really challenging behavior, we might want to move directly to a functional assessment based intervention. And David had a good point before we head into the breakout room that ideally, like in the perfect world, the question is, can you do this without families participating and collaborating? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's always better, in my opinion, though, to make sure that you start with making sure the family is comfortable with you doing this thing that is extra, that is not for every single kid. And they absolutely are always a part of the team when they are able to do so, but you don't have to have them there to do this well. Across the tiers and meeting people where they are, just such a gift to get the time. And now we're going to hear from Carrie, and this is a perfect segue from some of our conversations about working within the tiered system to build rewards. And I know a lot of you have PBIS in place, so this might make a lot of sense. And if you don't have this, contracts will still work as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. All right. So in step 5, this is where we really identify what the rewards are. And as Kathleen already mentioned, we're going to be working within the Ci3T system. So we're going to be using our tickets so that we're helping generalize. So for example, we're going to give one ticket at the end of the day for the students achieving the goal of their contract. One of the things you may want to do is help the student think about how they want to use those tickets. So if the ticket in and of itself isn't quite enough, have them think about, one of the things I know you really like is you like Spencils, and I know we have those in the school store. So once you earn 5 tickets, you can turn those in for Spencils, or you can turn it in for a homework pass for students who may want to avoid that homework. So really helping the student kind of think out how this is going to benefit them in not just that moment that day, but a little bit further down the road. And so you are going to also continue to use additional reinforcers along the way. So even though with the contract at the end of the day, when they achieve it, they're going to get their ticket as a reinforcement, you can also continue to use your behavior specific praise, your high fives to give them a little more reinforcement along the way as well. So one of the things that you also want to consider is the possibility of a bonus clause. So you have a student, they've been doing great, they've been meeting their goal every single day, and when they exceed it, maybe you want to give them a little bit extra. So maybe at the end of the week, when you meet with them to talk about their data, you're going to give them an extra ticket and say, hey, you did a really amazing job this week. You met your goal. You got your ticket every day. Here's one more for just going above and beyond. This is also really a great opportunity to ask them, how does that feel? How does achieving your goal feel? So that they start to have some additional reinforcement developed as well, with just that feeling of pride or success that may come with achieving their goals. And then the other thing we want to always consider is coordinating with the family. So not all families are necessarily going to be able to give a reward, but families often want to be included. And so helping them plan things that are going to be manageable. So it can be something as simple as, if your student gets 5 tickets, they get to pick the movie that the family watches that night, or they get to pick what you're having for dessert. We really encourage families not to do anything elaborate. We don't want any kind of budget busting ideas, but we want things that are reinforcing to their students. So it may even be something like, maybe your student gets 15 minutes extra of time on whatever video game or social media or whatever they already do that they can earn that they know is reinforcing to them. And then once you've really thought about what that reward is, you also really need to think about how are you going to track the data. So we put a lot of time into developing what is the behavior, what is the reward, who's engaging in this process. And now we want to make sure that we don't lose any of that clarity. So really thinking about what's that daily tracking going to look like. And with that daily tracking, really ensure that it is going to be clear not only for you, the teacher, but also the student and the parent. So everyone recognizes when the goal is met, when we're moving towards that goal. And then the goal, just knew that this data tracking sheet is not only going to serve as your data collection point, but it's a great visual reminder to review the data with your student. And then also part of step 6, beyond just that particular monitoring tool is we also want to pause and check treatment integrity, social validity, in addition to our student outcomes. So we want to make sure that this plan is being implemented the way we intended, and we want to ensure that we're including feedback from the stakeholders. And so when you look in the module, you're going to find a fabulous treatment integrity checklist. You're going to find some social validity surveys for the teacher, the parent, and the student. And the parent and the student ones are also in Spanish to help ensure that you can engage your families. And then we have a fabulous tracker to help you graph your student outcome, because graphs are amazing, right? All right, so now that we have talked about the reward, we've talked about the data, it's time to write up the contract and sign the agreement. And with that, I'm going to hand this back to
Thank you.
Kathleen.
And let's give a shout out to Carrie. We appreciate her time tonight. And as she went through those pieces, what we're going to encourage you to do is to actually put time in your calendar to either continue this conversation on your own, thinking about like what that might look like for a student, or if you're lucky enough to like have a thought partner for people that are in your building. We had some people that used to come years and years ago, and they always used to say it was like dinner and a show, but for free. So they would sit in person and we would serve snacks, and I loved that. So it really felt nice to know you guys were here together as a couple. As Carrie mentioned, you're going to go through and make the logistics of the contract after you've decided which approach you're doing and what those details are going to be. And then when those pieces are in place, and in that ebook that you went through, there are multiple examples of completed contracts. We can also include, there's also a list of resources that can take you through next steps. But once you have the pieces laid out, the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that it is indeed really happening. And you heard Carrie talk about important things related to this whole science of how it works. And one of them is reviewing treatment integrity data to collect information on the specific pieces. So for example, when you start at the very beginning and say like the student's going to do this thing, the family's going to do this thing, or the teacher's going to do this thing, we need to check regularly to see, are those things actually happening? And so when that part is in place, that is called the treatment integrity checklist. So if it has like 5 steps to it, you're going to keep track Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, literally every day. If I want to see different behavior every day, I got to do it every day. And then we're going to actually graph it. So when Grant talked about like having an objective, setting a goal, we need to collect that information on whatever that target behavior is to make sure that that new behavior is happening. So in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that you're looking at, you see baseline data that are blue. So that's looking at, in this particular thing, it's hand raising. And you can see it is very low. And one of our breakout rooms was actually talking about hand raising, because sometimes kids forget it's a 2-part thing. Like you raise your hand and wait to be called on before the words come out of your mouth. And oftentimes kids will do the raise their hand and they'll start talking and you'll say, can you hold on? And they'll say, I wasn't talking. I was only saying this. And I always wanted to say, that's the part. Those are the words coming out of your mouth. But I really believe in the kid code, so to speak. They think that if they're talking about the related task, it doesn't count, but it all counts. So in this, this is the hand raising. We want to see more of that, the raising the hand and waiting to be called on. So when the contract's in place, we draw a phase change line and we continue to collect data to see how is this working. So if Grant was doing a contract in me, it might look like this and I might be doing really well. And people aren't going to want to hear this, but I want you to hear this from me. To know if it's really the contract working and not something else, you have to stop doing it, which means once the intervention is working, and I'm watching Carrie laugh, like you physically take it away for a couple of days and see what happens. So if hand raising all of a sudden drops and you see, it's worse when I don't do it, it's worse, then I can put it back in place. And how many of you have ever like asked for help at your schools, like a behavior specialist or, somebody, right? A lot of us have. And oftentimes they will come to you and say, all right, but before we get started, let's collect a little bit of data. And in that moment, you want to hurt them just a little bit because like you've already done everything that you know how to do. You just want to get started. By you doing these tests like this will give those people the information to know if this turns out to not be enough. So once you have the contract in place, you're collecting your treatment integrity data, you're graphing the information. These are not secrets. We actually want to share this with the kid. So if this was my kid, or like say Julie was a kid in my class, when I graph it in the beginning to say, I want to show you what it looks like from my perspective. So, when we talk about like raising your hand and waiting to be called on, I collect information to see how that was working. And those blue dots represent what it is. So I wanted to try this contract so we can figure out a way for us both to really enjoy each other's company more and make sure that this is a productive place for us like to do the business of teaching and learning. So in this contract, here's what we're going to do. And you're going to show the kids their data as they progress. Like today in schools right here in Kansas, we've been meeting with kids for the last week to show them graphs, not for this, but for a different intervention. And we're literally walking the kids through this to say, when we first started, before we did anything, it looked like this. When we put this in place, we saw those changes. And do you remember when we stopped it for just a little while? That's because we wanted to see, was this the thing that was really working for you? And as you can see now, we've been doing this for several weeks and you are just doing exactly what I hoped for. And then all along the way, they're getting that feedback. This is also how you're teaching them to read graphs and other things. And when this is taking place, before you start, as was mentioned earlier, you want to get input like from those involved before you start these contracts. Because if a kid tells you something like, I'm nervous about kids thinking I'm different, or I'm nervous that people are going to think I'm, a bad kid and I have to do this extra thing, then we can talk to them about the why, what they can share with their friends, or we could talk about maybe keeping the contract in a more private place if it's embarrassing. But we literally want to listen and learn from the kids about how we make this better for them. And we share it out as part of our work that we're doing right now with this other group of incredibly wonderful 32 teachers. We just finished working with 15 of them. We went and asked them when they were done with the intervention, and they've been doing this for like 8 weeks. We went and talked to every single teacher to find out what worked for you, what could be better, what did you like about it? And we asked them a very important question. Knowing what you know now that you've done this, would you still have said yes? And would you do it again? And I can tell you that's important, because if somebody tells you, I feel like this was worth my time as a teacher, they've just been empowered to go get another tool in their toolkit to do it well. So these aren't research things. These are life things. If you are asking a teacher to do something else, like a contract with a kid, and you're asking the kid to do it or the family, we need to know if it's working, because time is a precious gift and it's not promised. So tonight, I love the question about like, where does this all fit in? These are standalone strategies, and the intent is to take the opportunity to work with teachers whom we admire and adore and respect, and administrators who are also seeking to empower teachers so that we can put other tools in their toolkits. Some of you are here from Kansas tonight. And in Kansas, when people come to professional learnings like this, they earn professional learning points. And I know many of you that are here tonight from Kentucky, thanks to Dr. Royer, you will be earning CEUs. He's like doing that bridge with your district. But in Kansas, I want you to know what they also do is they will offer double the points if people come to these things and then apply them in their classroom. And if they then use data to see how it's working with the kids, they can actually submit like a treatment integrity form and a completed graph. And they can say, this is what I've been doing. And they can earn triple the professional learning points. So this 2 hours translates into 6 hours for them. And I just want to mention this to you because I think it's great to learn from other great examples. But if you're here tonight, feel free to follow up with us and we'll be happy to show you how that happens. As we talked about earlier, this is a standalone session. Tonight's topic was all about behavior contracts. It was focused on a tier 2 support. So for kids that have moderate intensity needs, if you're doing screen, it would be kids that are scoring in the moderate risk category or in the yellow. If you choose to, we would love to have the gift of your time. And the next 2 sessions that we're offering, one is on March 26th, and that topic is direct behavior ratings. And then the last one packs a punch is for kids that have the most challenging of challenging behaviors. And Eric Common, who's here tonight, and David Royer, who's here tonight, I know they've taught classes at the university level on how to do this, and we are prepared to take 15 weeks of an intensive intervention and distill it into a really wonderful starting point for you, but it will be a starting point. And that is designed for people that have children that have the most impactful behavior. And that'll be a real gift to learn about the reasons why their behaviors are happening. So like if you have kids tonight and listen to this plan, if you have kids that you're thinking, I could really try this with whomever in my class, you guys could go build this contract and try it out. And then if your data suggests that your children need more than this, like the contract, then you would be ready to learn about the functional assessment-based intervention at that next training, two trainings from now, so that you can dig a little deeper. So we are prepared to take you through this journey. I know some of you will be here tonight to learn to go do things different. And I really loved it. Somebody earlier was talking about, I really, honest to God, like I want to learn more about why are we doing this reinforcement thing? Why are we using the tickets? There's a whole module on how to do reinforcement. We want to make sure that you have what you need to feel empowered to welcome kids into your classroom and create positive, productive learning environments. We can be rigorous and still respectful in our interactions with the kids. And the things that I want to leave with you is the reminder that there's 2 more learning opportunities together. You will get an evaluation. It will probably already in your inbox now. And Stacy, does it come from your name? Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it'll be the wonderful Stacy Williams. It'll just say Stacy Williams instead of the wonderful, but it'll come from her. We'd love to hear from you how this goes. And I do want to tell you one other thing. In schools where Ci3T is in place, and again, it has positive behavior interventions and support at the core, plus social and emotional well-being instruction and academics all rolled into one. We have learned from teachers that they tend to report lower burnout rates than the national average, not on every domain, but on most. So they tend to basically be less likely to depersonalize from kids. In other words, they're building more positive relationships. Teachers are still very exhausted, but they have a better sense of accomplishment in their teaching and they feel more effective in many domains. So tonight, as you close, I want to echo what Tammy just put in the chat. Carve out time for yourself. Take 15 minutes to reflect on what you've learned today. Go explore some other new resources and check out some of the other ones. And you only need to register one time as a user. Feel free to come back and share with us what you've learned. We also have monthly drop-in, just like Ci3T trainer and coaches calls, if you want to come share and continue the conversation. But for tonight, thank you sincerely to all the coaches and to Stacy, and thank you to the presenters, to Grant and David and Carrie. Thank you for the gift of your time.